Hello and welcome to the Media Box at this, the 23rd Plenary Session of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. I'm Charles Amponsa. Joining me straight from the debating chamber, the hemicycle, is the Commissioner for Human Rights here at the Council of Europe, Nils Muižnieks. Thank you very much for joining us straight from the chamber, as I say. This is your first address to the Congress as such. What role do you think local authorities should be adopting when it comes to protecting human rights?
I think they should be adopting an active role, a proactive role, not only in addressing the issues that so often end up on the agenda of local authorities pertaining to education or social exclusion of migrants, of Roma, but also in terms of trying to anticipate how to manage tight budgets and preserve human rights. Basically how to involve civil society and human rights experts and equality bodies in budget planning and budget monitoring, to be aware of the consequences of different budgetary choices, but also to proactively reach out to groups that are excluded and to gather information. And they're actually much better place to do that than national authorities are.
You mentioned budgeting there. It's difficult because we're living in tough financial times across Europe at the moment. Can we actually afford human rights budgeting at local authority level right now?
I think that the cost of not having human rights at the center of budget discussions at both national and local level is very large in the long term. So, for example, one of the questions had to do with policing and the role of police in preventing urban violence. I think if you don't invest in the police, if you don't have good community policing, if you don't invest in good relations between the police and different minority communities, then the cost of urban violence and urban unrest is enormous afterwards. So a little bit of prevention can go a long ways and save you money, actually. And I think especially as it pertains to children, if you do not invest in children's education, if you do not prevent child poverty, the consequences will be there for a long time to come, and it will be much more expensive in the long term. So I think human rights are a very good investment in good times as well as in bad.
Now, what about planning? How can authorities include human rights into local government planning?
Well, I think the first issue, of course, is participation and involvement of civil society, which often knows the situation on the ground much better. There are these standard human rights principles, procedural principles of human rights, which should be a part of any budget process. Participation, transparency, accountability. If you don't have participation before the budget process, you will have it afterwards in the form of demonstrations and various kinds of unrest, and we've seen that in very many places in Europe. And actually involving human rights structures, human rights ombudsmen, human rights commissions, and civil society is absolutely essential because they know the situation on the ground and they can help predict the outcomes of various policy choices, and they can give voice to those who do not have a voice at the table.
You mentioned at the ground level, who are the most disadvantaged, disenfranchised people at the ground level in Europe at the moment in terms of the way local authorities see them?
Well, I think Roma in many places throughout Europe are among the most disadvantaged. They are the poorest, the least educated, the most unemployed. They often live in segregated settlements or in camps. And they have a very difficult time in standing up for their own rights, and they need the help of both local and national authorities as well as international organizations such as the Council of Europe. Another group, I think, are migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. Especially in times of austerity, the welcome mat has been rolled up and put away, and the policy response is very often detention of people for extended periods of time in awful conditions, and basically to keep them out of sight of mainstream society. So we don't often see this group, but they are there, and they are often behind bars, and they need our attention.
In the hemicycle, we heard talk of mayors and how mayors can be important in the local authority picture and how it can transfer up to the national picture. What are your thoughts on meeting mayors and being involved at that level?
Well, I haven't done this yet on a country visit, but I've become convinced that it's absolutely essential to meet the mayors, not only of the capital cities, but of other big cities, because the situation that I've already encountered is so diverse and so contradictory. You have instances of excellent practice at the local level in some areas of a country and of awful practice in other places. And I think I need to engage actively with the Congress, with mayors and other local authorities when I go on country visits. I noted, particularly in federal countries, dealing with regional authorities is absolutely essential, because the central authorities often say, "Well, we would like to address your concern on this, but this is not really our competence. This is up to in our federal system. It's up to the local authorities." So I'm going to have to do a lot of traveling outside of the capital city, and a lot of meetings, and need to have a lot of meetings at the local level, because I think it's important for me to engage with them, and as well as with national authorities and NGOs.
Nils Muižnieks, thank you very much indeed. That's the Commissioner for Human Rights here at the Council of Europe. You're watching the Media Box at the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. We're back with more comments soon. Goodbye for now.